But at the end of the day, those who win the medals and the trophies are the players. So in critical thinking, we must focus on devising ways to solve the challenges and turn them to opportunities rather than listening to naysayers. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, no deal ever competed with the sun. Critical thinking will only take its rightful position in the mainstream of Africa's development by appreciating the realities and the fundamentals that we confront today. Otherwise, just like the morning dew is quickly vanquished at the earliest appearance of sun, critical thinking will remain at the peripheries of development in the continent, and its much needed impact will remain on the fringes of development as a mirage. Thank you.
And I think we're all inspired. How many of you will say, now I will take action myself? Okay, thank you so much.
I don't know what to say. I am so moved.
Looking at him, you notice that he has challenged us in terms of attire. Can we appreciate his resplendent attire by rising again and delivering to him a thunderous clap? His speech was inspiring to us. Can we rise up again, raise our hands, and deliver to him for ourselves, for being there to listen to him? Can we rise up again, shake our hands, and deliver to him? Thank you, Dr.
Dr. Richard Munanga, I follow you on Twitter.
Thank you.
My question is, you said that you cannot survive on borrowed salt. Well, we know most African countries, we are surviving a lot of borrowed salt. Is it borrowed monies, either from the West or from the East?
So we are challenged that we should give solutions to some of these problems that we've encountered. And one aspect is to use our skills, our talents, so that we can solve some of these issues facing Africa. That was just a comment, and I'm impressed with your speech. Thank you.
Thank you.
I interacted with some German students, and they were very keen on Fridays for Change movement, which is it's very outspoken outside, but around here it's surreal, and I feel like Africa has more important problems. So how can you make the normal, like myself now, how can you put that climate change problem like it's a big problem? Because given that things like air travel are not as common here, like I don't take a plane from Mombasa to here every day and pay like $15. It's not working like that. So how can the normal person be sensitized to see the emergency in climate change in Africa?
Mine is more a comment in support of what Dr. Munang has told us, because in addition to being in literature, I'm also in African Women's Studies Center, where we did a research on food security. And we found 18% of Kenyans go to sleep hungry without dinner. 18 million. But one important thing that you didn't mention, which I think is very, very crucial, especially because these are young people here. I'm even afraid to mention the percentage, but a very large percentage of children under 5 years old are malnourished, suffering marasmus, suffering kwashiorkor, and the brain of a child develops between the age of 0 to 5. Thank you.
It's cool that anytime a question is asked, the person asking the question knows the answer, and what he or she wants is to validate and also see whether your thought process is the same like his or hers. So what I will do is not to be exhaustive, but answer the questions through my thoughts to the way I see them, based also on experience and what is reality. I know the first question was politics, but I'm not a politician, so I'll answer this in the most practical way as I can without engaging in politics. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, that said, the reality is, whether you borrow or you don't borrow, it doesn't really matter. And whether you have or you don't have, it doesn't really matter. What matters is, where do you inject what you have so that the returns on investments are higher? And if you look at the entire African continent, Africa's catalytic sectors are agriculture and clean energy. Any other thing comes in as an enabler. You can only argue from a position of strength in anything. And I've said this so many times. You can only compete from a position of strength. If you do not leverage on your comparative advantage, you can never be competitive. What the science is telling us, and even empirical and practical evidence have shown, if you add value to what is produced, you will create an agroeconomy that is worth $1 trillion US. But Africa is not adding value to what she produces, but then she export employment and then import unemployment. What am I saying in answer to your question, which was borrowing here, borrowing there? That is not the issue. Invest what you borrow where returns on investment will be higher, and the returns on investment is in the agro value chain that is worth $1 trillion US. And this cannot happen alone. To add value, you need clean energy. To add value, you need to retool people's skills. You need, whether you're doing literature, chemistry, biology, it doesn't matter. Can we have a compulsory entrepreneurship course that everybody must take and it can be practical? Can we then revamp and ensure that the educational system in the entire continent integrates entrepreneurship, not just from the thinking that we must do things in the higher end before we become relevant, but to start addressing the challenges, and each and everyone must take it before he gets a degree from any university? These are practical questions that we must be able to answer. And the point is, if you invest in the agro value chain and you retool everyone's skill relevant to the aspects, because agro value chain is not just about agriculture, is not about production only. It's about processing. It's about transportation. It's about connection to markets. All these intervening value chains need specialists, legal practitioners who can then be able to help people set up their enterprises in the agro value chain. It needs engineers who can develop tools that can be used to add value, fabricate solar dryer. Everyone is relevant. Can this be prioritized and those investments injected into it? I call it misplaced investment priorities, not leveraging on the competitive advantage sectors that Africa have got in abundance, 365 days of sunshine, but trying to do everything and not doing anything sometimes. That's the best apolitical way I could answer that, but which is more practical. You know, politics is sweet, but sometimes we get caught up not talking about real things. So I decided to answer it in a real way, not into politics. The second one was a comment. Thank you. Yes, the reality is that the continent of Africa have spoken about problems for over 60 years today. We have spoken about problems. We have discussed about problems. It is time for solutions. The problems we know. The problems have been established. The solutions we also know. But it's time now for us to become solution providers and not complainers in chief. I will keep repeating this. We complain so much. When it rains, we complain. We do not harvest the water. When it is sunny, we complain. We do not tap the energy to add value. When it is, when you wear white, they complain. When you wear yellow, they complain. When you wear green, they complain. We cannot become a complaining continent. It has not helped. There is nothing wrong to be worried about the challenges, but those challenges should humble us and inspire us to action. We should mobilize like-minded people, like this event here today, to think about solutions, not complaining about the problems. Yes, we know there are 250 million people who go to bed. Yes, what can we do about it should be the question. Not, no, these people are just there. No, we need to, and then blaming others to do it. Always ask the question, what are you as an individual doing? Like I always say, if you succeed alone, you have actually failed. Success is about touching others' lives. It's about lifting others up from the bottom of the pyramid, not pulling them down. You know, in Africa, we are very good at doing that, right? You go up, they pull you down. It's terrible. We must change that attitude. The third question Yes, well, this is my point of view. As a climate change specialist, this is what I would say. Awareness is important, but awareness alone is not enough. I always say that system thinking is what we need, and this critical thinking should be within the context of system thinking, which is, as awareness is created, action should also be taking place at the same time. The science should be refined. The policies should be refined. The actions that are happening on the ground should feed back to inform policy, and in the course of each of these science, policy, action, there should be discussions around it. So awareness alone is important but not enough. And you as the individual do not need to be a climate scientist to talk about climate change. Climate action is an investment opportunity, especially for the young people. I mentioned the agro value chain. If you go today, you look at those who are fabricating solar dryer, and there are a lot of them here in Kenya, and you say, okay, I'm a literature student, but you do not need to learn how to fabricate it, but he who is fabricating it, you know that a mama mboga in a village who is producing vegetables, those vegetables get spoiled because you cannot dry them. Can you be able to connect that mama mboga to this solar dryer and even connect her to a circle? And in the course of doing that, you'll be able to get your cut. That is a business you will create for yourself. You can be marketing that. You do not need a PhD to do that. You just need to tell yourself, I am able, and I want to be part of the climate action solution and start doing something, but seeing it from a business perspective. That's how you create jobs for yourself. Simple as that. Young men and women are doing it in Kenya, yeah, they're doing it in Togo, they're doing it in Uganda, through the spirit of what we call it innovative volunteerism, which is quite very simple. What can you do using what you have, which is yourself? Because the biggest blessing we have is by existing. And we always undermine that. And I always keep repeating this because we complain in a continent that is so favorable, beautiful weather. We complain in a continent that have the biggest manpower, over 60% of youth. So if you're talking 1.2 billion people, just say 60% of that. 720 million people, young people, with the manpower, and like the professor was saying, they stand and count cars on the road. And in the evening they complain, hakuna mpesa, hakuna kazi. And then they say, serikali saidia. No, I cannot do anything, no serikali saidia. Government will help. When it rains for you, even to put your pocket to harvest the water, no serikali saidia. Let me tell you this, this is reality, and it sometimes will be very factual and realistic. The era of government to legislate policy, to implement policy, to report policy is long gone. The role of government is to create an enabling environment and provide incentive for non-state actors to take action, and those non-state actors are you and me. Serikali Saidia philosophy is not going to work anywhere in this continent. The fourth aspect, thanks a lot, Anne. I mean, that was a comment. Yes, that's true. I didn't go into the nitty-gritty of the specifics to talk about malnutrition, but the reality is, this is my point, my personal point, and in no way am I speaking on behalf of my institution on this particular point. Which is Richard Munang's point. Infrastructure is important, but not enough. The biggest important infrastructure is the mind. What is great infrastructure? With that, part of the retooling of skills is not just from the fundamental stage, what I call the infantry stage. If we do not have young people, kids growing up with a mind that is already set in such a way that have the ingredients, that have the vitamins, that can make them think well, no matter the population of the continent, Africa will be taking last. And food, and which kind of food you eat, what you eat determines what you become. In terms of health, that can then have a productive population. But the reality is that the continent have abandoned crops that are not only nutritious. If you take cassava, for example, cassava is an allergen-free crop. Cassava is not only rich in multiple vitamins, but at the same time, cassava can be processed into 300 products, whether it's cassava flour, cassava cake, cassava beer, for those who drink it. For cassava anything, 300 products. Even the cassava leaves, nutritious. Even the cassava peelings can be turned into briquettes to light your jikos. but we've abandoned it. Indigenous ideas, indigenous crops, abandoned. Cassava is a climate resilient crop. It grows during droughts, floods, it is there. So we do not need magic. Africa doesn't need magic. Africa doesn't need juju. Africa needs logic. No, Africa doesn't need magic. Africa needs logic. And the logic is simple. Connecting the dots, critical thinking, leveraging on ideas. Ideas transform societies. Money alone up front bring fights and kill ideas. Thank you.
And I think we're all inspired. How many of you will say, now I will take action myself? Okay, thank you so much.
Because the world today is a global village. A skill from a Kenyan is relevant to a Ghanaian, to a Cameroonian. What is right for the benefit, collective benefit of all and to solve problems. So never be a complainer in chief.